So going back to the trauma aspect of your life, you know, everyone is going to have some sort of hard time in their life. That's pretty much a guarantee. And you've dealt with multiple situations like that already. What advice do you have for someone going through an incredibly dark period?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is not judging your emotions. I think when you go through a trauma, you experience it and then you judge your experience. So for me, I was incredibly close with my dad. Like could not imagine a closer father-son relationship. And after my dad passed away, I cried once. Um and for several months, I continued to feel unhappiness and anxiety kind of in a derivative form, not from just the loss of him, but from my judging of my experience of the loss, right? From me saying, how could I only cry once when this was my best friend? Why, like, I watch people cry profusely when they're watching a TV show and someone dies. How could this be my experience? And I got to the point where I realized there was nothing productive about that judgment. There was nothing that I was going to I was trying to seek an unanswerable answer. And I think that's for me has been a really important thing to realize is knowing when an answer I'm looking to answer is unanswerable. If I continue to try to analyze, I will just be in this vicious cycle that never ends. And the only way to get yourself out of this cycle is realizing that I need to come to peace without an answer. So I'd say that's the first thing is not judging your emotions and also not holding back emotions. You know, why did I cry once? Again, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I could break down, maybe it was a function of earlier traumas in life. Maybe it's the fact that I grew up in a household that didn't talk about emotions. Maybe it's the way I'm just biologically wired. But I think disconnecting my emotional response from my connection with my dad was a really important thing. I think the second thing was, again, not projecting what's important on other people, right? Like my experience in losing my dad reframed everything for me. It created a new anchor of what actual like shittiness meant, right? So it's like anything bad happens with Morning Brew. Anything bad happens in my life. Like, we got a new dog. My dog takes a shit on the carpet. Yeah, that sucks. But like it is galaxies away from what I've experienced. And again, like I said, that I think that is a valuable and can be harmful perspective for me to have, right? I think what that allows me to do is have perspective, not overreact to things, realize what truly matters. But if I don't keep that perspective in check and realize it is not fair of me to project it on other people, I think it can be largely unhelpful. So I think that's been a big thing is realizing that my change in perspective does not give me the permission to expect that change perspective from other people. And I would say the third has been, probably the most cliche, but the most real or true of my experience is how you react in the face of trauma really defines you. So, after my dad passed away, my last 2 years of college were by far and away my most successful. Like I had over a 4.0 my junior and senior year, definitely had below a 4.0 my freshman and sophomore year. Started Morning Brew my senior year after my dad had passed. Morning Brew obviously has had some level of success now. And I think a lot of that was a function of me just saying that there's two options. There's pushing forward or there's sitting back or falling back. And to me, that means there's only one option. And the caveat I will provide of that third learning is that it can be, again, in moderation, a really good thing, but in excess, a really bad thing. What I mean by that is I think it's been a really good thing how the trauma that I experienced acted as a catalyst for my career. But I also think there's negatives of that, right? Because it depends what drives you, right? Like if it was a catalyst of my career because it made me more ambitious than ever before, the question is, why did it make me more ambitious than ever before? Did it make me more ambitious because I was looking for fulfillment more than ever before? Or did it make me more ambitious because I took on the role of the father in my family and I felt a responsibility to now bring in money for my family because now it was only money out and not money in? And I think if I was to give you like the real and honest answer, it's probably both of those. I think in some ways I was now driven by doing things that actually made me happy because I experienced firsthand how like life is a lottery ticket, and in good ways and in bad ways, your people hit the lottery, and my dad hit the genetically shitty lottery. And for me, I had no perspective of what was going to happen a day from now, let alone 10 years from now. And so I think that ultimately was the motivator that got me to leave my first job in finance and work on Morning Brew, was this like newfound desire to not spend any more time than I had to doing things that didn't give me energy. But on the negative side, I remember in the hospital room with my dad after basically when he was in a vegetative state, we were going to pull the plug, and I remember putting my hand on his forehead. He passed away from a stroke instantly, was in perfect shape like you or me, and just no signs whatsoever. And I remember putting, my hand on his forehead at that point. His hand was cold, or his head was cold, and just saying, I'm going to take care of everything. And I think in some ways that was the best and worst thing that I could have done, right? It was the best thing because I think it gave me more drive. It created this fire that no one could manufacture. But it was the worst thing because it was basically me just taking ownership over everything, where now I felt the ownership to take care of my mom, my sister, my grandparents. And to be totally frank with you, in a lot of ways, it was a impractical ownership, because in a lot of ways I came from a background like where I was privileged, where I didn't have to worry about putting food on the table for my family. I was so lucky in that regard. But for whatever reason, me visualizing now that the person who was working so hard to bring money in for the family was no longer around. And all it was me spending money, my mom spending money, my sister spending money, no one working to bring money in. I just assumed that responsibility. And so I think that's the negative part of that third lesson. It was amazing how driven I became, but I think it was a drive that was partially driven for the right reasons, or for my true sense of like what gave me energy and alignment with my values. And part of it was driven to take care of my entire family, which potentially wasn't a burden I should have even assumed.
Do you believe you needed to take on that burden to make yourself feel whole?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question also, because I think while I didn't need to assume this burden to actually financially take care of my family, it's tough to, again, go back in time. And I made kind of the conscious or subconscious decisions I made, but I do think there is a very good argument to be made that the way my brain is wired, I would have always felt incomplete if I didn't, have that conversation with my dad, if I didn't assume all these responsibilities. Even though my family would have been fine, I would have felt like I didn't do enough to take care of them. And I think, again, it's tough to weigh what's better or worse, because if you go down kind of like that one permutation of life, you could imagine like maybe that was what was driving anxiety, is like, I'm still at Morgan Stanley. I don't feel like I'm providing enough financial upside for my family. And now what I'm talking about with my therapist is no longer the emotional reaction or lack thereof that I have with my dad, and any of my anxieties around building a business. And now it's, have I done enough to take care of my family?